Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's IAUG webinar, ASBCE TLS Management, presented to you by Arjun Sharma, Product Manager at Avaya. Before we begin, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for participating in today's webcast and for your support in IAUG. To our current members and those that are now new members by means of joining us today, I encourage you to visit iaug.org to get more information about how to get the most out of your membership, including upcoming events, IAUG product councils, and a library of online content. Now I have 3 quick housekeeping items to go over. First, today's webinar will be recorded and available for you on demand. Second, a Q&A session will follow today's presentation. All questions will need to be entered in the question window near the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen. And third, there will be a short evaluation that pops up as you exit the webinar. Please take a minute and let us know what you thought of today's session and what you might like to see going forward. Okay, let's get started. Arjun, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Julie. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. First of all, thank you very much for taking out time from your busy schedules to join this webinar. Really appreciate it. So before we start going through the slides, I just want to say a few words about how would we proceed for this session today. So we will start with taking a quick overview of what exactly is TLS, what does it mean, how does the handshake process happens, and some of the terminologies associated with TLS. I hope by doing so, it will help us level set on the overall TLS thing. There are a lot of people who think that TLS is just about certificates. I mean, the terms are used interchangeably, but in fact, TLS is way beyond that. I mean, it's a protocol that offers a lot of algorithms that will help you enable security over computer networks, over IP networks. So we'll talk about that when we go through the slides. So that will be a quick overview on TLS, and once we have done that, then we will try to understand how you can implement TLS on Avaya Session Border Controller. I've also got my colleague here. I'm not sure whether he was able to join or not, but I've got my colleague Upkar here to help me answer some of the questions over chat. I'm not a security expert, but with the help of the team here, with the help of my SBC team, I was able to put some material. So hopefully we will have a good interactive session. And if there are any questions that are unanswered during this session, I would request Julie to send them across to me over email, and I'll try my best to get back on them at earliest. So with that said, let's get started. Okay. Looks like my slide is not moving. Just a moment. Yep, here we go. Okay. So what is SSL and TLS? I know many of you would have come across these terms. You know about this, but just for an overview purpose, to help level set, I would like to have a basic overview of these terms. So SSL stands for Secure Socket Layer, as many of you would know. It's a predecessor of TLS. And TLS is a transport layer security. It's a protocol that enables secure communication over networks. Talking about a bit of history about this SSL and TLS, it all started with SSL 2.0. Many of you would know about this, but there was no SSL 1.0. SSL 1.0 had many flaws, so it was never actually released. And then it kind of made its way from SSL 2.0, 3.0, all the way now to TLS 1.3. Recently, the TLS 1.1 was deprecated last year, and the current active versions in market are TLS 1.2 and 1.3. So that was about quick overview. Moving on. So why do we need it? right? I mean, we talk about TLS, the importance of it, but what exactly it provides us. So when we say that TLS enables secure communication, right? What kind of security is it providing us? So essentially, it helps you with three things. It helps you with authentication, it helps you with the confidentiality, it helps you with the integrity. Imagine it like this, that you are talking to your colleague, right, who's sitting next to you, let's say in a cubicle. You want to have a conversation with your colleague, but you want that conversation to be secure. So what TLS would do in that case, right, first of all, it will ensure that you are talking to the person who he or she says he is, right? You should be able to verify the identity of that person, and then you would want to make sure that whatever data exchange that happens in that conversation, that remains protected. And also, both the parties should be able to determine if there was any alteration to the data that was exchanged. So these are the things that TLS helps you with: the authentication, the confidentiality, and the integrity of the message exchange. It does that with the help of so many different algorithms. Like, I mean, for the authentication, it uses asymmetric cryptography for the exchange of the actual messages, the encryption of the actual messages, which is also known as bulk encryption. It will use symmetric encryption, and to make sure that the integrity of the message is not lost, it uses called as message authentication code. We'll talk about these terms in a bit more details in the upcoming slides. Going further, so this is a very simple representation of what happens underneath, right? How does TLS works? So at a high level, there are two steps that are involved. First is the handshake, where the two parties, the client and the server, right? They negotiate on the version that will be used. They um, they decide on the cipher suits that will be used for the duration of that session, and keys established. I think when you talk about TLS, this term of public key, private key, or in simple terms, the key will always come in, right? So the key is the key to TLS communication, right? Um, if you have to imagine it in a normal world, imagine it something like that. Two colleagues are exchanging messages. Let's say they are sending letters to each other. So they are putting that letter in a box which is locked, let's say with a number lock, okay? And over the lock, you are putting your signature, something like that. I'll let you know how does that translate to actual TLS, right? And while making that exchange, you are making sure that the letter is typed, let's say, in upside down format, and both of you know about that. So the sender is kind of encrypting the information, and the recipient will be kind of decrypting the information, because he knows that the letter needs to be read upside down, is written upside down. So kind of that's what happens when the actual computer systems are exchanging messages, or when this exchange is happening over the network, right? So first of all, they agree on what kind of encryptions they would be using for the communication. Okay, a secret key is established so that they can encrypt and decrypt using those keys, and then the actual message is transmitted. And they also make sure while the message is being transmitted, that is also encrypted using the same key, so that the recipient, assuming that he has the key, would be able to decrypt those messages. So that's at a high level. Handshake and record. Handshake helps you with authentication, um, uh, and the record protocol helps you with the confidentiality of the message and the integrity of the message, like we saw in the previous slide. So taking it one level further, talking about the handshake, because that is critical to TLS, right? When the communication starts. So it all starts with a client sending a hello message all the way to the server. And these are the key information that the client sends across. First of all, it tells the server what kind of version, a TLS version that it would support, what are the cipher suits, um, the key exchange messages, and it shares its keys. Let's say it is going to support two different key exchange mechanisms, like in this example, finite field group and elliptical curve groups. So it will send the key for both of them, and the algorithms that will be used for signing the message. So in response, server picks up the offers that was made by the client, and it also sends its own certificate, because certificate is the way that the server identifies itself. It says, okay, I am google.com, and here is my certificate, so that you can verify that I'm actually google.com. And if so, that is the mechanism through which client authenticates the server. It knows, okay, I'm talking to google.com. And if it's a case of mutual authentication, that means server would also like to identify the client. So when server sends a hello, it will ask the client to send his certificate as well. So the next time the client responds for that server hello, client would send its own certificate. That would let the server verify, okay, the client is presenting its certificate. It is signed by a valid certificate authority. So that's at a high level, the handshake happens. Going further. So in this slide, I have put together some of the terminologies, because this whole overview of TLS protocol, right? I would say it's a session in itself. There are lots of videos on YouTube that you guys can go through that talks about these things in detail. And in this particular session, we won't be able to go through all the concepts in this session, because we want to keep it more towards the ASBC oriented. But when we talk about TLS, there are certain terminologies that used to scare me, at least, and I'm sure that would be the case with some of you folks as well. So I've put together some of those terminologies and what does it mean. So you would come across this term symmetric encryption. As the name itself suggests, what it means is that the key which is used for the encryption or decryption at the client side or at the server side, it's going to be the same key, right? That's why it's called as symmetric encryption. The reason this particular encryption is used, it is also called a bulk encryption, because symmetric is way faster than asymmetric encryption. And if you were to use asymmetric for encrypting the messages itself, the overall process would have been very slow. So that is why symmetric encryption is used for encrypting the actual messages itself. Asymmetric encryption, it's used at the authentication level. There is this asymmetric encryption. That's where you would hear the concept of private key and public keys. So the gist is, the private key and the public key, they come in pair, right? So only the holder of the private key with the public key can decrypt the messages, and it is assumed that the private key is not shared with the public, right? It's not sent directly over the internet. So the private key will remain with the server, and it will be used to decrypt the message. Some other terminologies, AES 256, ChaCha, DHE, they are all nothing but encryption algorithms with which the messages are encrypted. GMAC Poly 1305. These are the algorithms which are used to make sure the integrity of the message is not lost. You might have heard about AEED. So all these things kind of they add a level of complexity, I would say, to the whole process, so that it is not easy for anyone on the internet to kind of interrupt, I would say, to kind of take those message exchanges and use it in some other way. So AED is nothing but adding data on the encrypted messages plus the MAC code that is used for the integrity purpose. Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve, they are complex mathematical algorithms that are used for how would you exchange the keys, right? Because the keys are exchanged over the network. Anyone can exchange those keys, but how do you exchange those keys implies that they are exchanged in a secured manner. RIC was another algorithm that was used mainly till 1.2 time. It's kind of not used in 1.3. Now, the actual digital certificate, which people talk about a lot when they talk about TLS, that is used for authentication. It provides the digital identity. So just like a passport, right? Our passports are signed by passport authorities. Similarly, if you were to generate a certificate, let's say for your server, for your SBC server, you would go to an authority which are called a certificate authority. Some of them are like VeriSign, Entrust. On the internal side, you will use our Avaya system manager servers to sign those certificates. So they are trusted certificate authorities. So these are some of the terminologies that I wanted to touch upon. Now, I hope that we are at a level where we understand some of the TLS terminologies. At a high level, we understand how the handshake and exchange happens. Now, we divert our ship towards how does this TLS is implemented on Avaya Session Border Controller. So this slide talks about some of the overview about TLS management on SBC. First of all, what do we mean, right, when we are saying that we are implementing secure communication on SBC? It essentially means that we are making sure that every communication that is happening through the SBC is secure, right? So SBC has two gates. It has an external facing world. It has an internal facing world. External is B1, as most of you might be aware. It's A1 side. It has a B1 side. It has a A1 side. So making sure that every communication that goes across those doors are secured. That's what is meant by saying that we are enabling TLS on SBC. At the moment, although I have talked about TLS 1.3 in my previous slides, but TLS 1.3 is not supported on SBC. We do provide support for 1.1 and 1.2. We plan to add 1.3 support. It's part of our roadmap. Now, if you were to enable TLS on SBC, do make sure that your SBC is enabled with encryption licenses. Without encryption license, you cannot enable TLS. If the contract with the customer is a subscription customer, okay, it's a subscription-based contract, then SBC entitlements are part of UC Core and UC Power subscriptions. So encryption license are part of advanced tier of licenses of SBC, and you get advanced licenses as part of Core and Power. So make sure, I mean, if it's a UC basic customer, in short, right, you won't be able to enable encryption on that system. It supports third-party certificates, some other things. I mean, it's like we only provide support for PEM encoded certificates. For other formats, there are utilities provided through which you can convert them to PEM certificates. And TLS is a very critical thing for SBC, right? Because you're making sure that the communication is secure. So if you were to set up TLS on SBC, I would say sit down, take time, plan your configuration beforehand, and then only go for the implementation because it's critical. So some of the things that you would like to make sure while doing this setup is making sure that NTP is there, because the PEM certificates are very time sensitive. So making sure that all the elements in the network are syncing to an NTP server. So things like this will help you to set up TLS properly on SBC system. Moving forward. Okay, so let's talk about what are the steps involved that will help you set up a TLS on SBC. As we go through the next slides, I would like you to keep this picture that is shown here in your mind, right? So these are the gates that I was talking about. The B1 side, which is facing towards the external. So let's say that is communicating to a SIP trunk service provider. And on the internal side, you would typically have a call server, CM or SM, right? Now, the certificates that will be used for the internal side of communication will typically be signed by a private CA. In most cases, if it's an Aura based call server, you would see that those certificates are signed by system manager. And on the external side of things, more often than not, you would see them signed by a public certificate authority like VeriSign, Entrust. I've just listed two here, but there are many more. So at a high level, what we would be doing is making sure that the root certificate of the CA authorities are installed on SBC. In case if there is an intermediate certificate authority is involved, make sure that you install the chain or the entire all the CA certificates involved in that chain. Now, for the SBC to get an identity certificate for itself, you would need to start with a CSR request that you can generate out of the SBC. SBC provides an interface to be able to generate a CSR request, make sure, and then you would need to get it signed on by both the CAs as shown in this picture. On the internal side, it will have to be signed by SMGR. On the public side, it could be any public CA. And then set up the TLS profiles and make sure that your trunking configurations, right, they reflect the TLS profiles that you set up. Okay, so let's go. So in the next slides, we'll be going through these individual steps and see if there are any key pointers for those steps. So I won't be able to go to the details of each and every individual steps here. So I think there's this first bullet you will see in all the upcoming slides. So in essence, make sure that you go through the TLS management chapter on the SBC admin guide that has a very detailed step-by-step instructions on how do you set up TLS on Avaya SBC, right? Now, if I talk about obtaining or installing the CA certificate on the SMGR side, there is a procedure where you can log into SMGR, download the root certificate and install it on the SBC. While you install it on the SBC, make sure you select the option of that. You let the SBC know that it's a CA certificate. Similarly, you can get that root certificate from your public CA Okay, some of the key pointers. I think it's very common ones. Always make sure that your certificates are valid. Although it sounds very obvious, but we have seen issues coming from the field where we realize that the certificates are not valid. Either the date has not started or the date has expired. Both kind of scenarios are seen, right? As I said before, we only support PEM format, so no other format is supported. And if you were doing it via the EMS interface, make sure that you synchronize. But if you are doing it from the SBC interface, then the synchronization happens automatically. So there's a simple step. Make sure that you install the root certificate. Now, talking about generating the CSR, many of you would have done that, I'm sure. It's a simple form that needs to be filled out. There are some critical information that's there because it's critical because that's what identifies your server. So the CN field, which is known as the common name, right? That will typically be the FQDN of your SBC server. So make sure you fill in those information appropriately. Now, since SBC has two sides, as I've been saying, so you will have to generate two CSRs and get them signed by the respective CAs. Some fields that you need to make sure are checked are key encipherment and digital signature. And while you generate a CSR request, a key is generated in the background automatically. So once you take those CSR requests to the public or the private CA, get them back and try to install it on the SBC, you will see an option of using a key. So those are generated while you do the CSR request. Moving on, this is the next step. It's about installing the identity certificates, and I've shown a screenshot here. So you would come to this screen by going to TLS management and certificate section, and then give the name to the certificate, give it a good name so that you can identify it, right? Because a lot of people gets confused by how they manage their SBCs, because the confusion adds because there are two sides of SBCs, and which thing is used on which side is that care needs to be taken. So install the certificate, and there is this option of using the existing key, and the drop down will show you the options of the key that were generated the CS during the certificate request. So install those identity certificates. You will have to repeat this procedure twice for the private side and the public side. And that brings you to creation of the TLS profile. Now, this is the most important step in establishing TLS communication on your SBC, because this is the basis of how the TLS communication happens on your SBC. So make sure you spend time here, make sure you do this right, so that the communication is secure. So there are two kinds of profile. First is the client profile, the other one is the server profile. The client profile comes into picture when the SBC is acting as a client. So SBC will act as a client when it's a case of an outgoing message. It will act as a server when it is a case of an incoming message, right? You would come across this field called as peer verification that you won't be able to edit when you are adding or managing a TLS client profile, because that will be logged to required. So peer verification is nothing but a way for SBC to enforce the mutual authentication. So on the client profile, it will be logged to required. On the server side, right, if you want, you can make it optional or you can make it required. Our recommendation will always be to enforce mutual authentication as far as possible. Although we understand that when the SBC is talking to endpoints, right, the mutual authentication in some cases becomes challenging, because the administrator need to make sure that they are managing the certificates for thousands of endpoints. So yeah, we understand those challenges, but if you really want a very tight security, make sure that mutual authentication is enabled everywhere the SBC is communicating. There's another field which is of importance. It is called as verification depth. So it basically suggests that whether the certificate was signed by the direct root CA. In some cases, especially on the public side, right, you will have a root CA, you will have an intermediate CA. So accordingly, you need to configure the setting. If there is one intermediate CA involved, then you would put the verification depth as 2, one for the root CA and one for the intermediate CA. And then you can also set the versions that the SBC needs to offer for the TLS. Now, going further, we would suggest that you only enable TLS 1.2, because TLS 1.1 is deprecated. So only keep TLS 1.2 enabled. So that's about creation of the TLS profiles, some key pointers for that. And then it's an easy step. Whatever profiles you create, make sure that you let the SBC know on the signaling interface and on the SIP server profile that what TLS profile it needs to use. So here are those are screenshots. Just go there, configure the ports properly, use 5061 for TLS, that's the default port, and configure your TLS profiles. So this is a very small slide. These are your tools for troubleshooting. I know if you have logged on to SBC even once, you would know about them. But Trace SBC helps you immensely to know what's happening with the handshake, where it is failing, to which side it is failing, and by going through those messages, you can diagnose more about where exactly the issue is. So that brings me to end of my presentation, and now I would go to this panel and see if there were any questions that I can answer. Give me 1 I don't see any. I hope I was audible. People did not fall asleep. Were there any questions? I'm sorry, just a moment.
There are a few questions in the question area. Not check that
Yeah,
panel and see the
I
chat.
see them now. Yeah. Okay. Is there a reason why it would be better to use a public CA signed cert on the B1 side of the SBC? I think it's answered as well. Thank you, Upkar, for answering them. Let me see if there are any unanswered questions. SBC is a security device and requiring a license to enable encryption of foundational talent of InfoSec seems silly. Okay. And the second comment on that, one gap in SBC TLS management is the separate key store used for chain of trust with external web. This is not administrable via GUI. So I can provide some inputs on your first comment, Mark. I'm not too sure about the second one, to be honest. I'll see if Upkar would be able to comment on that. But for the first comment, yes, I see your point. But what I would like to say here is our business is moving in the direction of subscription, as you guys would have come to know about it, right? And there's no subscription package, I would say, is dedicated to SBC, right? It's all entitled in our UC Core, UC Basic, UC Power subscription. Now, the strength of our SBC is in the remote worker setup, although it's extensively used for SIP trunking as well, but more often than not, we see deployments where the remote worker is used. And whenever you need the remote worker capability, you need to have the advanced tier set of licenses. And when you have advanced tier set of licenses, you get encryption along with it. So that's the thought process that has gone into while we designed our licenses, and that's why it has been kept that way. So, and the part two of your question, Mark, I would see if Upkar has some inputs on that, but I can get back on your second question. The other one, do we need to create an identity cert for each point if mutual if mutual authentication is enabled? Yes, you need to create an identity cert, and Car can keep me honest here. This question came in from Mark Federici. Yes, we need an identity cert. Okay, going to the next one from Mike Bernardin. We find that installing certificate constantly fails unless we check allow weak certificate key. Why is that? Oh, that's a good one. So allow weak certificate key, what it does is it tells SBC that if you get a message where the key length that was used was less than the default value of 2048, I think, you allow that communication to go through. So that's what it suggests. Now, the installation of the certificate ideally should not fail if you do not check that box. I'm sure the fix would have been provided in some version or the patch, but if it is still observed in 8.1.3 version, which is our latest version on the field, I would request Mike that you make a note of one such instance and raise a service request with us, and we'll see what best can be done. Okay, I'll take the next unanswered one. Thank you, Upkar, for answering the other ones so quickly. Every time you build a security profile and install certs for it, do you have to or just the SD? Yes, I think, but I think the restart of SBC process is more applicable when you and Upkar can keep me honest here, when you kind of make the changes to the certificates and oh, I think he answered it, that the latest version does not need a restart. Thanks. Okay, can we get a copy of the PPT? I'm sure Julie will help with that. Could there be a scenario where you use TLS on the external but TCP on the internal one? Yep, We have seen this. We have seen this working, and because deployments. What happens is you trust your internal side of things to be secure, and if you trust it well enough that the intruder would not be able to come to the internal side of your enterprise, then yeah, some deployments keep the internal leg on the TCP. But I would advise strongly against it, um, because TCP is insecure, and if you have Aura in your deployment, right, you get a CA, right, with that in form of SMGR. So please, as long as possible, keep TLS end to end. If so, what is a good way of managing all the individual endpoints? I don't have a very clear answer about it, Mark. Mark Federici. Um, um, I think it needs to be managed in the ways that is generally used. Yes, they do expire, and that's when they need to be renewed and things like that. I don't have a good answer. I can try to better my answer over email, but yeah, I'll move on. If B, this is from Josefa Patwa. If B1 has an SMGR signed identity cert, you need to distribute the root SMGR cert to the endpoints. If B1, okay. If this root SMGR cert is compromised, someone gets a hold of it, would that cause security concern? How do you fix this? Okay, that's a good one. Yes, I think if someone gets hold of a certificate, then yes, it's not a good situation. Yes, there are chances of intrusion. Now, how do you prevent that? So there are multiple layers to it. From after the TLS handshake, right? The user also needs to log in. So you need to make sure that you apply the most stringent password policy in place. Now SMGR, I think if you create a SIP user and SMGR, as far as my knowledge goes, I think it can support up to 14-digit alphanumeric password. So you make sure that those passwords are stringent. And also the SBC has some inbuilt security intelligence as well, right? Um, features like call walking or DOS and DDoS attacks, if that's also part of your concern, the SBC can detect those kind of attacks and prevents itself from those attacks. In fact, in our upcoming release 10.1, we are working on a new security feature which is called as automatic blacklisting, where if someone is trying to gain access of SBC by knowing certain IP addresses and ports and things like that, we would be able to detect such attacks and take preventive. I mean, we will we would block such attacks in such cases. So, Huzaif, a short answer to your question, yes. Uh, use mutual authentication, use stringent password policies, and enable SBC, set up SBC for all kind of security mechanisms that SBC provides, like DOS, DDoS, everything. Okay, going to the next one by Joe Carey. Will work. Sorry, not able to get. Just a moment. Will work only if the client has a certificate instruction. Obviously, it is not practical to have a public certificate. What's the best way to auto enroll your test phones to automatically enroll itself to generate its own SMG or CA using SCEP? I'm sorry, this is a tough one for me, Joe. I don't have a good answer for this one, but if I get this over email, I can go back and check with my team and get back to you with an answer. I'm sure my colleagues on the SMGR side and on the client side would be able to help with an answer for this one. So I'll get back on this. I think the question from David Cruz is related to Joe's question. So uh, I'll try to provide an answer for both. Okay, going to the next one. This is from Mark. The public cert of the root CA is what is this way as long as the I think this is more of a response to earlier questions. So I'll skip this one. But let me go. The public cert of the root CA is what is this way as long as the private cert part of the root CA cert is not covered. It is not a problem. Yeah, that's correct. That's correct, Mark. Okay, going to next one. If memory serves me correct, IX Workplace, for instance, will send PPM STTP. That's absolutely correct. Do PPM STTP authentication with the SIP communication password before receive. Yes, so PPM communication happens before the actual SIP registration in case of IX Workplace. And that communication is also secured because not STTP, but in fact STTPS is used for that communication. And once the PPM kind of that PPM flow is done and successful, that's when the actual SIP registration happens. Let me go back to the top of list, see if I missed anyone. Any plans for SCP certificate enrollment for endpoints on the SPCE? I'll have to get back, Mark, on this. Um, I think we do have something similar in our backlog, but at this point, I do not have an estimated timeline for you. So I'll have to get back. Could someone attempt to brute force the password through PPM, get HTTPS against the communication profile password, thus bypassing any of the SIF firewall rules that are in place? So if someone is trying to do a brute force attack through this continuous messages, right? The, the, some of the SBC security mechanisms, like DOS, DDoS, call walking, and the upcoming one about the automatic blacklisting, that should alert the SBC that this is what is happening. Someone is trying to gain access, and it should be able to block those requests. Any plans to create CSR and install cert for M1 Secure Access? Not too sure. I would let Okkar take this one, see if he has answer for this. But if this is something which is not available today, then we'll go back and assess on what it would take to add this functionality. Yes, of course, the management layer also needs to be secured. I think, to my guess, it's something that is there, but if it is not, then yes, we would want to have this functionality available on SBC. And I can work with the current SBC PLM, who's one of my colleague, to add this in our backlog. The other one is from Diego Castillo. If a TLS certificate expire, the calls won't come through, right? Does the SBC generate an alarm? Yeah, if the certificate is expired, yeah, that will result in the failure of communication. And yes, an alarm will be raised. The next one is from Terry, not seeing allows for M1 cert expiration. Okay, Terry, if you have if you have one such instance captured on any customer location, I would request you to raise a service request and we'll look into it. To your question, Joe, about basically the process that happens via the AEDAs, right? I think what you have mentioned here is correct. That's the flow. That's what actually happens. Yeah, I see you've got also confirmed to that. Julie, I guess no more questions are coming.
Okay, great. Well, let me take a moment to say thank you to you, Arjun, for taking the time to speak to us today. As a reminder to the audience, this webinar was recorded and will be available for you on demand. You'll receive a link to that recording in the next 24 hours. And also remember everybody, Avaya Engage 2021 is right around the corner next week, taking place December 12th to the 15th. It'll be packed full of information with insightful keynotes, practical learning labs, face-to-face discussions with the leading industry thought leaders. So visit the IAUG.org website for more information. From all of us at IAUG, thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Upkar. Appreciate your help.